Very welcome, Cathal, to our conference, which we've made a good start today. And just to introduce Cathal to you all, Cathal, he leads up strategy for a great place to work, where he's CEO there and has worked there for 20 years. His specific expertise is in building the required architecture that allows an organization to develop and sustain high trust cultures that underpin strategic success. And so, obviously, resonance is with what Colin was talking to us about. So, Carl's session today will focus on the true essence of great workplace cultures. What needs to be the key obsession to build great cultures? What has the focus been for workplaces in a remote setting? And a case study of examples of organizations that have improved their workplace culture. So over to you, Carl. Thank you. And I'll keep time and keep an eye on questions. And again, to remind people, post some questions in the question and answer channel there, and I can ask them at the end to Carl. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks for that, Dave. Appreciate it. I hope everyone can see my screen all right. Isn't it crazy time as we leave?
It has just gone off there. It has just gone off your slides. Is it black at the moment? It's black at the moment.
I can see it fine. My end.
Try again. Do you want to? Yeah, there we go now. That's good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that,
Perfect.
Dave. Dave, I'd love to meet that chap that you introduced there. He sounds like a very interesting. Well, delighted to be with everyone today, and just to give you, I suppose, a little background in terms of myself. I'm a graduate from TU Dublin, or DIT, as it was called, and actually myself and Colin met each other in college many years ago, and we've been struggling to shake each other off since then, So not only is college a great place to get an education, but also to make some good connections as well. And the role I think that a lot of us play on this call is such an important role in terms of developing future leaders. So look, it's a real privilege to be with you all today. And a couple of things I want to kind of leave us with, sort of in terms of my presentation, is what are the actual things that organizations focus on to build great cultures? Because I think sometimes we can get a bit carried away with what LinkedIn is telling us in terms of what workplaces are actually doing. So I want to give you some practical advice around how that works. And what I'd say as well, as we're talking to our students and the graduates that we work with, it's important that when they're looking for a workplace, that they choose a workplace that is committed to building a strong culture. And when we talk about great place to work, when we talk about best workplaces, that's all decided upon by the internal experience of the employees. It's not us deciding, it's internal employees. And then we have a model where we help organizations improve their culture. So started the business after I left college, and it's been really interesting in terms of learning with companies and supporting them along a great place to work. So I just thought it'd be interesting to start with this, which is our workplace culture, like what we do for our people in terms of that employee experience, that's all on public display now. So just like when we're choosing a restaurant, where will we choose to eat? We might go on TripAdvisor, or if we're choosing a hotel break or something like that. Well, what candidates are doing now is they're going on Glassdoor, and they're trying to get a feel for what is this organization like as a place to work? What has the experience been of existing employees in terms of, is it a good company to work for? What's the level of management within the organization? And that's a key part of the search criteria of talent. Before they go for an interview, they're online, they're searching social media, they're on Glassdoor, and they're trying to get a feel for an organization in terms of where they choose to work. So in a way, that's a scary place for us to be as leaders, as companies. Because not only are we building a strong culture internally, because it's good for people, but we also have to be mindful of that external piece as well. And there is common mistruths as to what makes up a great workplace. Sometimes in our heads, we conjure up images perhaps of something like this. So people chilling out, playing pool, playing snooker. Is it about this? Is it about unlimited holidays? Is that what makes a great workplace? Unlimited holidays. What about this? Free food. So how interesting is it going to be in terms of over the last year, the nice office environments were taken away from many companies, and what are they left with from a cultural point of view? So is a great culture about, giving people free food? And it's not about any of that. It's actually about trust. So year on year, we work with hundreds of organizations. In the year just gone, we would have surveyed over 60,000 employees across the island of Ireland in different workplaces. And what makes a great workplace is the levels of trust that's in place, which absolutely correlates with what Colin was talking about earlier on in terms of his presentation. And Colin actually did a webinar last week with a client of ours, Fáilte Ireland, and he interviewed the CEO of Fáilte Ireland. And the CEO of Fáilte Ireland described trust as being like the oxygen for the workplace, the oxygen for the organization. And when trust is in place, things move smoothly. Communication is good. Things flow. We can adapt to change. When trust is not in place, or when the oxygen is taken away, well, often the counter takes place. So when we're talking about how do we build a great workplace, how do we build a great team, this is a definition that many organizations out there will use. Can we build a great team where we trust the people that we work for? Can we build a great culture where we have pride in what we do? And can we build a culture where people enjoy the people that they work with? And I think that's useful as a frame in terms of as we think about our own teams, as we think about our own organizations and how we build that strong culture. And any organization, public or private, any team, big or small, can build a culture that meets those three key objectives. So I just thought what I would do is I'd share with you some practical examples, perhaps, of what organizations do then in terms of focusing on the basics. Because remember, a great culture is built on doing the basics really well. And if we do the basics really well, we build trust. We build trust, we have a great culture. So I suppose it's March last year when many of us were plunged into sort of working from home. I'm sure, like many of you, I haven't seen my team physically since the first week of March last year, which is crazy when you think about it. And what we did for our clients is we said we'll run a pulse survey for our clients just to give them some data as to what's working in terms of their employee experience and what could they do better. And we ran that between April and May of last year. And the results were interesting, right? So we ran the pulse survey, we asked some questions of employees, and then we armed leadership team with the responses so they could make some improvements. And some of the areas just to share with you, so communication, we asked people, my manager gives our team clear direction. 82% of people agreed with that question. Management keeps me informed about important issues about the impact of COVID-19 on our organization. 89% of people in agreement. I feel my concerns are being listened to by my organization. 89% of people in agreement. So when we looked at the data, what it showed us was, if you think of March last year, workplaces trying to figure out how to do this whole culture piece remotely, many workplaces put a really good response in place. Many workplaces had a really good reaction to the challenge that they were faced. And we can see in terms of the data and the quality of the data that employees really appreciated the work that they did. What we also saw is that there was a trust bounce in terms of the results. So there was an element of employees giving companies the benefit of doubt because they were trying to do their best. I think the challenge is how we sustain those trust levels over time, if you like. And just zooming in on the basics, right? Because it's important when we think about this ambition of wanting to build a great workplace. It's not about the free food and it's not about the unlimited holidays. It's about doing the basics really well. And I just thought it'd be useful maybe to share with you some practical examples of what those basics look like. So here's 3 organizations, mix of industry, mix of size. Guidewire, Squarespace, that are company and website development, and Plan International, which is a charity organization. And we work with all 3. And I thought the initiative from Guidewire was really interesting, as in how do we create a connection between our leaders and our employees during this time of change. And the CEO, Mike, he decided that he would give of his time 30 minutes every week where employees were invited onto a call And it was sort of an ask Mike any questions. They'd come onto a call, they'd ask Mike questions about that are on their mind. Will the business survive? How are we doing? Remote working, how can you support us? And I thought it was a great demonstration of trust from Mike to give of his time, make his time available, come on and answer those calls with employees. Squarespace decided, let's give everyone in our organization time off in terms of, to look after their mental health, right? To allow them to decompress. Okay. And what was really good about how they did it was they ensured that there was role modeling on the part of leaders. So it's not just about giving people time off. They ensured that their leaders took the time off and shared with people in the business what they were doing with the time off. And also then they provided a guide for people managers in terms of being able to handle this practice. So it's not just about doing the practice. They made sure there was role modeling across the leadership team. And they also provided a support for the people managers, which was really good. Another very basic area to look at is the idea of connection. How do we create connection with people? Even more so important when we're living in a virtual space and we're working in a virtual space. A small organization, Lehman Solicitors, they have about 30, 40 employees in Ireland. What they came up with was an initiative called Lead Chat, which was everyone on the senior team was tasked with calling somebody in the business that they didn't necessarily know to have a conversation with them. How are you doing? How are you handling remote working? How are the family? But to really just concentrate on making a connection. And then every couple of weeks, the leadership team would get a different person who they have to call. And there was one key criteria. When they made that call, they weren't to talk about, the work as in the business and all of that. It was just to make a connection, which I thought was really good. And along that same sort of line, PEI are another client of ours. They're in the medical supplies business. And again, it's about management team making themselves available to speak to employees. And they organized a virtual coffee morning. Every Friday morning, over 9 weeks, the management team made themselves available, invited 6 employees at a time to come on and just to have a conversation. Again, making that connection between leaders and employees, answering any questions that are on employees' minds. Another area, the area of employee health. So we hear a lot about sort of health and well-being, if you like, and I'll just pick out 2 organizations here. So we've got Sky, which we're all familiar with, and Pepsi, of course, to drink, and Sky have recognized that, their employees can, like all of us, can have challenges from a mental health point of view. They've now trained all of their managers on being able to spot the signs of mental health in their team members, spot the signs of depression in their team members. All of their managers are trained in terms of that area, which is such an important thing to be able to focus in on. And what a great commitment on the part of Sky to invest in that for their managers. And then a really simple initiative, Pepsi are an organization we work with, and they would have 24-hour manufacturing facilities in Cork. And they came up with a wellbeing initiative called One Simple Thing, which was at the performance appraisal between a manager and an employee. They also agreed one simple wellbeing initiative that the manager would work on to support that employee to achieve. And for some, it was just, could I get flexibility on a Tuesday evening to allow me to train? For some, they had, some ambitions in terms of doing things outside of work. It was a different host of initiatives, but it was well branded, called One Simple Thing, and a great demonstration of how an organization can look after an employee's well-being. I'm conscious that none of these things are, they're not huge solutions, they're not complicated solutions, but again, it's about doing the basics really well. We're often asked, can an organization improve their workplace culture? And of course, the answer is yes. We work with many organizations to improve their culture. This is an example of an organization, Avantcard, used to be the MBNA, used to be MBNA, located in Carrick-on-Shannon. And they came to us a number of years ago asking, could we use your model to help improve our culture? And what we have on the screen here is just an infographic that flows the journey that they went on. So Colin talked about trust and the importance of trust. At the start of their journey, we did a survey of all employees, leaders, managers, and their overall trust level, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, was 57%. So the first time we presented the results back to the leadership team, they had a trust level of 57%, which in practical terms means almost half of their employees did not trust the organization. Okay, but that's fine. It's about seeing where we are and then building in a plan around improvement. So we presented the results to the leadership team and we supported them around building an action plan. And you can see down the bottom in terms of the sort of the architecture of their action plan. The senior leadership team focused on the area of management and leadership, communication and involvement. HR looked at reward and pay. There were some pieces around benchmarking of salaries. They looked at performance management and career development. And they had an internal working team of employees called the Culture Vaders. They're very proud of that name. And they looked at the areas of how can we improve recognition, engagement, and well-being. So we had a plan with many different levels of the organization involved. One of the key points I would say to you is when I presented the results, I was able to tell them that their middle managers, their people managers, had lower levels of trust than the people that they were managing. In summary, what that meant was the middle management team did not trust the senior leadership team. So it's good to be aware of that. And one of the initiatives that they developed off the back of that was they invited middle managers into their senior leadership team meeting on a rotated basis, just to build that connection between senior and middle managers. And you can see the following year when they went to do the survey, their trust levels were 73%. So they had gone from 57% to 73%. And one of the questions that we asked that I think frustrated the MD, Chris, more than anything else was, we asked the question, do you believe that the organization will act on the results of the survey? And the first year they did it, it was 51%. And after putting a plan in place, the second year, it was 79%. So that's the power of being able to put a good action plan in place. And they're certified, recognized as a great place to work. So this is now an organization that works on their culture every year internally. What can we do to get better? But is also able to say, we are a great place to work. And that is really helpful in terms of being able to attract talent. So what I challenge us all is no matter where we're at, no matter what type of organization, you can absolutely improve your culture with the right model. And remember, it's all about trust. It's important not to get carried away with perhaps what we see on LinkedIn and what we see, what we hear about from some of the big tech companies. It's all about trust. Can we build a culture and a team that has high trust levels in place? And you build trust by doing the basics really well. That's how we build trust. And a great place to work is a high trust workplace. And just for everyone listening, we have launched our podcast, The Red Cube, and be delighted if anyone who does get their content through podcasts to feel free to go onto The Red Cube and have a listen. I think there's some good content there, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. So, look, it's been a pleasure to come on, and hopefully there's some.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Cathal. It's been great. It's kind of demystified for me. One of the big things, the words, of culture in an environment. So the way you brought it down to the basics and to the micro elements of it. We have a few questions flowing in here, and there's one here from Mark. What are good questions for job seekers to ask current/past employees to get useful insights into culture?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. What I think a really important question to ask is any question that gives you a sense as to the company being interested in improvement. So, like, being a great workplace is about being committed to improvement. So any question that a candidate can ask to say, well, here's an organization that's continuously improving, I think that's a really good thing to ask. It's not about being a perfect workplace, but it is about that commitment around improvement. I think the other thing I'd say is it's important to look for external validation, external accreditation, but be careful about the methodology that they're looking at. I think it's important that if an organization is saying they're a great place to work, it is important that it's based on the internal experience of employees.
Great. And just from a student's perspective, Paula has asked a question about, why is culture so important? From a student's perspective, they often have no idea what culture is, and when they go into an organization, and probably from a careers perspective, we probably don't even talk enough to students about understanding the culture of an organization to whom they may be applying. We don't give enough emphasis to it, possibly.
Yeah, I think, and sometimes it can sound a little bit highbrow almost, this idea of culture. The best way to describe it is it's the way things are done in an organization. It's sometimes it's the values, it's the principles of the organization. I was having a chat, Dave, with a company that's interested in joining our work, and the CFO said to me, he said, "We don't have a culture." And I said, "Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?" And the reality is everyone has a culture, right? It's just about, can we measure it and can we improve it? So I think, what is culture? It's the way things are done. I think, if I was choosing a place to work, I would try and get a sense of the values of that organization. And as a candidate, make some decisions in my own mind. Do I think I'm a fit for this culture or not? Because you're going to give the best of you as a candidate and work in a company. They're getting the best of you. It's important that it works out for you and the company.
Great. You've kind of almost forethought about one of the questions that has come up as well about you get the plaque on the wall, we value X, and we have our value statement on the website. How do you think companies bringing that from kind of from as I've written here, from from plaque to practice in a way, and then for us to understand that.
Great, Dave. We play a little into organizations where we see the values on the reception, and we go up and meet the team. And the first question we ask is, what values do we have in place? And often you'll get 5 or 6 different answers, which is sort of saying they're just a plaque on the wall. They haven't been made come alive. So I think the key piece with values is, how do we actually make them come alive? Do we recognize people for living the values? Do we have a set of behaviors that match those values? Do we talk about values in terms of the performance review? But I think what's really important as well, Dave, do we manage people out of the business for not living the values? Like, there's an organization we work with called Version 1, and it's actually it's an interview there on the podcast with you. And one of their values is no ego. And I asked Jarlath, the people success director, what do you mean by no ego? And he said, well, it's interesting, when we're trying to make an external hire for somebody on the leadership team, they really struggle with the value of no ego. And part of the hiring piece is, when you come to work in a role, you will be asked to sometimes do jobs that you might feel are beneath you, and they're testing you to see, has this person got an issue with with doing a particular role? Do they have ideas above their station, is another way to describe it. So I thought that was a really interesting value.
Right. Yeah, I'm reminded when you're talking there, I remember the book on the culture of the New Zealand rugby team. It wasn't no egos, it was no D heads. So we'll keep it PC here.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions, and if I can just piece them together, we've about 5 minutes left maximum. In the ways in which companies demonstrate their values to prospective employees. So obviously, from a careers perspective, we're seeing companies come on site, be it virtual careers fairs, in-house careers fairs, even through literature, employer events. How do you support them, to communicate their values so in ways that are understandable to students?
Yeah, I think this whole area of employer branding, Dave, right? So when lots of big tech companies arrived into Grand Canal, that square, that area, there was a fear amongst many workplaces going, we'll never be able to match their salary. And what we spent a lot of time with, working with organizations to say, well, it's about figuring out what's unique about your culture. How do we compete? We may not be able to pay the most money, but maybe we can do development better than those organizations do. Maybe we can do work-life balance better than those organizations. So it's about your unique value proposition, Dave. And I think some organizations do it well, but I think many organizations could improve in terms of how they come up with 3 or 4 unique things that you'll get if you come and work with our culture. Version 1, that company, their employer brand is a great place to work, not a nice place to work. And what they mean by that is we look after you in terms of culture and all of that, but it is a difficult place to work as well. And they're just trying to get that right fit in terms of somebody who is up for the challenge as well of working there. So unique value proposition, 3 or 4 things that the organization front up with.
Great. It strikes me as well, probably a little bit of a job, reflecting on myself, it's a little bit of a job of work for us to support students in understanding workplace cultures and how it resonates or not with their own value systems and how they like to move and operate in the world and what's important for them in a role. As we said before, it's you do your task, but it's the environment in which you live 8-9 hours a day that you're submerged in that has impact for your, obviously your success and happiness and enjoyment and fulfillment. There's just one or 2 last ones quickly, Cathal. Can you, given the pandemic that we're all still enduring and hoping to live, some of the ways in which some of the companies have struggled, in this kind of remote environment and how it's impacted workplace culture?
I think the main piece, I'm just conscious of the time, Dave, but I think the main piece I would say is your ability to navigate your way through the pandemic was largely dependent on the type of culture you had coming into the pandemic. So if you had a high trust workplace coming into the pandemic, inevitably you navigated your way through that change a little bit easier. We did find that some of the low trust organizations we work with really struggled when things went remote and are still really struggling, and things like micromanagement and all of that. So I think the main point, Dave, is you've got to take a strategic approach to your culture. Good heaven forbid, we hope there's never another pandemic, but there will be change. There will be change, and it's when it comes to that change, do we have trust levels in the bank that we can draw on?
Great. That's a lovely way to finish. And just again, to thank you on behalf of all the participants here. We'll give that virtual round of